Hello everyone, today I'm going to make a video about money. I was inspired to make this video, well, first of all by a comment by Apollonian Slumber, just asking for my opinion on the topic, but also because I was thinking about the old Irish barter system. That was in the Brehon laws. There was a system of barter for trade and commerce, rather than a coinage system, where there would be, a money. Currency. And I did some research because of something I'd heard when I was a kid, and I wanted to see if it was true. And yes, it is true. Throughout the entirety of ancient Egypt, there was no such thing as money. There was no currency, no coins. Instead, there was simply a barter system. So, for example, a certain amount of flour would be equal to a certain amount of dried fish, equal to a certain amount of, types of livestock, cows, pigs, sheep, equal to a certain weight in silver or gold, but there would be no standard currency, no abstract evaluation of wealth. And that's what money is. It's an abstractification of wealth. And my thoughts on money are quite negative. I think a barter system would be much healthier for our society economically. And this all stems from the idea that money is an abstractification of wealth. Even if, for example, the exact amount of money you had, or the exact amount of money in the society was exactly equal to the amount of physical wealth the society was able to produce, which is never the case. Never. Even if that were the case, though, even then, the fact that you do not need to physically own all of, say, the actual wealth, the actual possessions, you can just own this abstract evaluation. For that reason, this allowed certain people to accumulate vast amounts of wealth, while others are not able to accumulate much at all. The second problem I have with money is that because in the past, say, when cattle were the main source of currency in many countries, as they were in Ireland, in order to be wealthy, or in order to have power by your wealth, you first had to have enough strength to enough power and influence to be able to hold on to that wealth, to those cattle. So you would not have been able to accumulate wealth without having a certain level of strength and respect and power on a social level preceding that. Or else you would have had to, say you inherited it from your father. In that sense also, your family would need to have that level of social power, that level of strength and respect in order to be able to maintain those goods in the society itself. There would be no equivalent of winning the lottery in those times. In order to come into contact with wealth, it would have had to be won via deeds, or else you would have had to maintain it, have the strength to maintain it somehow. Now, true though it is that often in these cases wealth could come and go quite easily. It could be quite fickle. So, in the modern sense, yes, we have a banking system which allows you to keep your money anyway, which I believe isn't a good thing. Because on an individual level, you might say, well, thanks for the bank, that we are able to save money and stuff like that, without having to do much to save it. The effort isn't put in on our side to protect the wealth we have. But of course, the majority of the wealth in the society is not owned by individuals. It's owned by entities, public and private, corporations, and government bodies. And of course, there are individuals who own it via proxy when these organizations, these institutions, might house their money for them. So most billionaires would have a large amount of stocks invested in various industries. They might, in order to avoid taxes or whatever, actually put all their money into some sort of company and have that company be based abroad where the taxes are lower, so that they don't have to put it in a private bank account where, they'd lose a lot more money. And so, not to go too much off topic, but if you look at, say, charity organizations, you'll find that a lot of these are just tax havens for billionaires. The CEOs, or whatever you call them, of charity organizations are all billionaires, like Concern and Trócaire, and I forget the names of all the charity organizations, but all the big ones in the West. It's that's how it is. And the third reason, and probably the most important reason why I'm against this idea of money, is because it allows for power to be maintained, and this sort of follows on from my second point. It allows for power to be maintained in the hands of people who don't deserve it. There is no better way of controlling a people than by controlling the very measurement of their wealth. If you can abstractify this wealth that they have, that they produce, say, it takes away the inherent value of all of the capital that exists within the society. So you could be a farmer who farms, 100 acres of land, and you would have to have, a lot of, farm hands employed to take care of all this. You'd have to dedicate a lot of your time into this exercise. And to look at the amount of wealth produced by this capital, it's an incredible amount of wealth, but it doesn't actually go to you, because it has to filter through this system of tariffs and taxation and selling and produce. The produce itself is not valuable; it's only valuable until it's sold, and then the surplus is what comes back to you in the form of abstract currency. Now, of course, in ancient times, or say in a system before barter, or before money, currency, all of the surplus would be kept by the person who produced that surplus. But now it's because it's abstractified, the wealth comes back to you in an abstract form. And if you take, for example, inflation, which is constant, I remember my parents said that they lived off 20 pounds a month, I think it was. That was back in 1970s. Now, or 1980s, not sure. Now, back in those days, money was about 10 times less valuable than it is now. Maybe not that much, maybe 5 times. However, it's a constant in decrease in the value of the currency. This means that the money you save away in the bank now, in 10 years' time, it'll be a lot less valuable than it is now. And so, it creates this illusion. It creates this illusion that that what you buy and what you earn today is somehow better than what it was yesterday. And because of this constant maintenance of this illusion that you're earning more and more money, that the GDP of the society is increasing. There's more billionaires today than there was before. All of the statistics are positive, and it's all a lie. Because the money itself is not worth shit. We earn more than what we did 50 years ago, and yet 50 years ago nobody was talking about eating maggots. Today they're saying we should eat maggot sausage. Eat maggots to save the planet. How outrageous that would be if 50 years ago they'd been saying that. Why would I eat maggots? I have my own farm animals right out there in the field. But now I think people are actually poorer than they were in the past. But due to the abstractification of wealth, they just don't realize it. If we were to measure wealth by not by the metric of something abstract, but we were to measure it by looking at the control you have over capital, or another way of looking at it, um, the amount of produce which you were able to keep. It's far less than it was in the past. Pretty much nobody in modern society, well, very minor population, are self-sufficient in any way. You're not even able to drink rainwater. You're not able to collect rainwater. All of the water you drink has to come from, the government and whatnot. None of this would have existed in the past. The power that people get from their possessions, from what they own, is far less. So even if, say, they own more than they owned in the past, this is all superficial, or the wealth which comes from this is superficial, because the power, the social power which they can extract from their possessions is far less than what it was in the past. A field full of wheat today is not worth what it was 50 years ago. That's another reason why the abstractification of currency is bad. It creates this illusion of constant growth when there is none. Then you look at things like just various methods which the powers that be use to say control the population. So if you look at quantitative easing, for example, there are various entities, both public and private institutions, as well as individuals who rule by proxy, who need to be kept up a certain level on the same plateau as the government itself, in order for this capitalistic system to be maintained. And for that reason, whenever, say, a bank, which is very crucial to the economy, or a certain monopoly is threatened economically, something goes wrong, and they make a huge deficit, and say, let's take a bank for example. This bank is unable to pay back all of its loans, or sorry, all of the loans people have, all of the money it needs to pay for their customers to take their money out of their accounts. The government can then just print more money and just give that money to them, and the bank can then just have that more money to spend on whatever they like. And often you'll find banks, the case is banks don't just deal with individual customers like you or me, but rather these banks themselves own a huge amount of capital, and the ownership of this capital by these corporations and these banks is very necessary for the economic model to be sustained in some way. And for that reason, the government will just print more money and give it to, say, to allies or people who need it to maintain that capital which they're using. And this creates a larger gap between the rich and the poor. It's true, no time in history has the gap between the rich and the poor ever been greater. It just wouldn't have been possible in a time without abstract currency. But it is now. You'll find people are living in 20 meters squared apartments. They're contemplating going vegan or eating maggot sausage. One or the other. And but at least they have a Netflix subscription. And they made the number in their bank account may be larger than it was in the past, but really it isn't anywhere near as valuable. The power we can extract from our possessions is far less than it was in the past. Furthermore, I believe the comfort which we extract from our possessions is also far less. Well, those are just a few points I wanted to make about money. Yeah, I could have touched on some more. I think I made more points in my actual original reply to Apollonian Slumber, but yeah, I just wanted to make a video just to make more points on that. There are two more points I'd like to add. Firstly, there are many parts of the world, and there is no part of the world really which is exempt from this possibility, where money itself is not very valuable at all. This goes beyond sort of inflation that you have, say, in Russia, where, say, it costs 15 rubles for a loaf of bread or whatever, but the ruble is so, it's still plausible that that you could live day to day and still save money, even with such high levels of inflation. But there are parts of the world where, certainly in Africa, where money is not valuable at all, and this is where this fallacy comes into play of giving money to Africa. If you donate money to a charity organization, this all ties in with the illusion of how people value their own wealth, right? Because it's abstract. They think, 10 euros, that can buy me, 10 loaves of bread. So if I give 10 euros to this charity organization, some African is going to have 10 loaves of bread. That's not how it works. Because by the time that money gets to Africa, what can be got in Africa with that money is just, it's just not the same. Let's say you're going to bring it in from Europe to Africa. Well, how many boatloads of produce are going to come into Africa to save whatever children are dying in some famine? If you look at Venezuela or places like that as well, it just no longer becomes feasible to work to earn money, because you can actually get paid less than what you need to survive. And that's one of the main dangers of money. It separates. See, in past societies, the absolute lowest you could earn would be just the bare minimum to survive, which would be almost like a form of indentured servitude. Really, it would be working just to have shelter and food and nothing else. Then above that, you had traveling sort of tenant farmers, I guess, and then you had people who could earn a bit more, tradespeople and whatnot. Those were even in the worst of times. For example, in the Irish famine, people one of the main solutions to trying to stop people starving was to pay them more. So people in workhouses were getting paid more money, and yet that money was useless because there was nothing to buy. There was no food to buy. And that's just another example. Last point I wanted to make about money is people who come up with this bullshit that we should raise the minimum wage or we should introduce some universal basic income. It's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Because the amount of money that would have to be added into the society to make that happen would basically mean that by the time everyone gets their 1,000 euros a month or whatever you plan on giving them, money would become it would decrease in value so much that all it would do would level the playing field among the poorest of the poor, while the rich kids wouldn't get affected whatsoever. So really it would just end up making the poor people poorer and making the divide between rich and poor greater. But ultimately that extra money would be not very useful because it wouldn't be valuable anymore because of inflation. And the money you earn in addition to that itself would become less valuable. So overall you just end up earning less and being able to extract way less power from your wealth, from the possessions you own. So that's the last point I wanted to make.